Mitochondria and chloroplasts are very important organelles for eukaryotes, and eukaryotes only. Bacteria and archaea do not have mitochondria, but they are relevant. More on that in just a minute. Both of these organelles are very important because they tie into that energy processing piece of what it means to be alive. So turning energy from one form into another. And it's really changing energy from one form of chemical energy into another form of chemical energy. And I talked about ATP very briefly in chapter 5, and we're going to talk about it again in the chapters to come. For now, it's what we need to know is that ATP is the main way that cells can do work, can do things, can exert energy. And these two organelles both are very important for that process of using cellular energy. So mitochondria are where cellular respiration occurs, and we produce ATP with that. Chloroplasts are where photosynthesis occurs, so that photosynthetic organisms can produce their own energy and produce the glucose that drives cellular respiration. So mitochondria and chloroplasts are thought to have, very, very long time ago, been free-living bacteria. And the thought is that these free-living bacteria were engulfed by some sort of early eukaryote. And the fact that they were able to do this energy processing so efficiently made it so that those cells that engulfed those bacteria didn't digest them and didn't just use them for parts, but instead allowed those cells to live within the early eukaryote, and that's where we get modern eukaryotic cells from with these organelles. So that mitochondria and bacteria may have once been their own organism that kind of moved in, became the pet of the eukaryotic cell, and continue to harvest energy for eukaryotic cells. And there's a number of lines of evidence for this. One is that both of these organelles have a second membrane around them. So they have a double membrane that suggests that maybe that membrane used to be a vestige of a vacuole. They both have their own ribosomes, and they both have their own very small circular DNA molecules, which is what prokaryotes have for their DNA. The idea being that it shrunk over time because a lot of those genes have been transferred to the nucleus of the eukaryote. They also grow and reproduce independently from all the other organelles. So the nucleus can direct the production of new endoplasmic reticulum, new Golgi apparatus, new vesicles, new ribosomes, but the nucleus does not seem to be able to direct the production of new chloroplasts or mitochondria. The chloroplast and mitochondria, when cells divide, there's just enough present, and they kind of migrate towards opposite ends of the cell without kind of being directed in the same way that other organelles are. So this idea that mitochondria and chloroplasts used to be their own free-living bacteria is called endosymbiont theory. Another line of evidence is that we still find bacteria today that seem to have homology with, or similar looking in appearance and metabolism to, mitochondria and chloroplasts through a type of proteobacteria for mitochondria and a type of cyanobacteria for chloroplasts. So here's just a picture depicting what may have happened a very, 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 very long time ago when eukaryotes first started to inhabit the Earth's oceans. This was back when all life was aquatic. There was a eukaryotic cell that had a nucleus and an endoplasmic reticulum that may have engulfed a bacterium that was a proteobacterium that was very good at cellular respiration, and that became the mitochondrion. And then later on, this non-photosynthetic eukaryote may have engulfed a photosynthetic cyanobacterium, and that evolved into a chloroplast in some lineages of eukaryotes, so plants and algae. This may have happened to, whereas for our ancestors, the ancestor of all animals and all protists that don't photosynthesize, ended up with just this kind of arrangement. So what is it that mitochondria do? You may have heard that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and that's all you need to know about biology. That's not all you need to know about biology, but it is very much true that mitochondria are great at producing ATP. How great are they? We will see in a couple of chapters from now. But today we're just going to sort of dip our beaks into the font of mitochondria knowledge and talk about the structure of mitochondria. So they have an outer membrane, as I mentioned, which is smooth, and then they have an inner membrane, which is larger than the outer membrane. It's larger than the outer membrane because it's all folded and twisted, and that creates a lot of surface area inside, which is good for doing the job that the mitochondria has to do, as we will see. So those folds are called cristae. Just one is called a crista. And the fact that you've got an inner membrane and an outer membrane means that you've got two compartments. You've got the cytoplasm surrounding the membrane, which surrounds the intermembrane space. Then you've got the inner membrane, and inside the inner membrane, you've got a mitochondrial matrix. So again, it's kind of like those Russian nesting dolls, where you've got space called a matrix, surrounded by an inner membrane, surrounded by an intermembrane space, surrounded by another membrane in the cytoplasm. So these last 2 points, we're talking kind of foreshadowing when we talk about cellular respiration. And like I said, a lot of surface area in those cristae for producing a lot of that ATP that we need for energy. So here's some pictures to show you what I'm talking about. Here's your mitochondria, the outside of it. They kind of look like kidney beans to me on the outside because they have, or like a kidney even, with that smooth outer membrane, then that intermembrane space with that all folded up inner membrane with loops of DNA and their own ribosomes. And inside the mitochondria, you've got the matrix. So that's a cartoon. This is an actual electron micrograph or a microscope photo of a mitochondrion. And here in a protist cell, here's the nucleus, and they can see there's all these different mitochondria with their mitochondrial DNA lighting up with a fluorescent marker. Chloroplasts are another organelle that is to do with energy processing. Chloroplasts contain chlorophyll, which is a green pigment, which is what they use for photosynthesis. And we'll have a whole chapter talking about photosynthesis, but again, we're just gonna dip our toe in the font of knowledge of chloroplasts just to have a few things to say about how they fit inside of plant and algal cells. So similar to mitochondria in some ways, they have an additional membrane. They have like a third membrane around an inner membrane, and then inside the inner membrane, you've got this fluid called the stroma that is surrounding these very folded up membranes that are called thylakoids. Stacks of thylakoids are called a granum, several grana. And again, it's to maximize surface area. They kind of remind me of stacks of pancakes if I'm hungry, or stacks of coins if I'm feeling broke. But the purpose of them is to give you a lot of surface area to produce a lot of ATP and a lot of glucose. So there are other plastids besides chloroplasts. Chloroplast means green plastid, but we don't need to worry about those other plastids. So what are the organelles that you need to know? Here's a list. So you should know their names, you should know their functions, and all of these are specific to eukaryotes, except ribosomes. Ribosomes are in all cells, but all the rest of these are specific to eukaryotic cells. So you should know these organelles and know their functions, what it is that they do.